Now, live with Greg Olson, Director of the New York State Office for the Aging.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you're staying warm today. My name is Greg Olson, and I'm the Director of the New York State Office for Aging. You know, we do so many great shows. We really do. And this one is not going to disappoint. It's really backed by popular demand, but we would have done it anyway. We're getting into the holiday season, just past Thanksgiving, moving into Christmas, moving into New Year's. And the holiday gatherings can be very unsettling for individuals with dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Caregivers may also feel enormous stress and anxiety, but there are ways to ease into the holiday traditions, creating a safe and inclusive environment. Here at the State Office for Aging, we really focus on three things. Prevention. There are lots of ways to prevent dementia and Alzheimer's disease, things like listening to music, getting your hearing checked, being socially engaged, not being socially isolated, eating well, exercising, and so on. It's also about early identification. The earlier we can identify a potential problem with dementia or Alzheimer's disease, the better the treatment is. And then, of course, management, helping those individuals who have Alzheimer's disease with certain tasks, as well as supporting the friends, families, and neighbors that support them. So I'm joined by literally one of my most favorite people in the entire world, Beth Smith-Boivin, but I call her Beth. She's the Alzheimer Association's Senior Director of Coalition and Grant Initiatives for all of New York State. We'll discuss tips that can help caregivers adapt and make the most of the holiday traditions for loved ones with dementia and or Alzheimer's disease. And as always, if you have any questions, we usually get a ton, especially on this topic, please put them in the chat and we'll address them later in the program. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. We are now in the millions of hits on not only this show, but some of the other things that we do here to bring important information, but more importantly, exceptional resources to you and your family so that we can all age the best that we can in our communities of choice with dignity. So Beth, it is so great to have you back on.
It's so great to be with you, Greg, always. It just always brings a smile to my face to see you and to share these tips to help make this season of what is supposed to be joyful for everybody, because as you mentioned in your opening, it really can be challenging for people with Alzheimer's and dementia. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And same here. So let's dive right in. For those who are already living with Alzheimer's disease or dementia, let's talk about tips for successful holiday gatherings and gift giving. And I have learned so much from you the last couple of years that this wasn't even a topic that I really even thought about until you had raised it with me, which is why I love doing the show. So talk about some tips for being successful for the individuals that we're talking about.
So good point for those people that we know already have this disease, and they may be in any one of the three stages. It might be the mild stage, the moderate stage, or the severe stage. And of course, the later that people are in the disease, the more advanced preparation we need to do. But the first key is really to do that thoughtful planning. Because for a lot of people, if you simply go about the holidays the way you did 10 years ago or 15 years ago with somebody that has Alzheimer's or another dementia now, the likelihood is you're going to have some challenges or fails on that day because it will simply be overwhelming and too stressful for your loved one. So it really begins with preparation, thinking about where your loved one is. Are they somebody that is overstimulated easily by too much noise, too many people, too much chaos? And if so, maybe part of your planning is to say, you know what, we're not going to have all 3 children and 9 grandchildren here at one time. Instead, we're going to have shifts of people that come and visit and perhaps overlap one another as well. Perhaps your loved one is sundowning, which really simply means that there's an increase in either agitation or anxiety later in the day. If so, perhaps 5 o'clock isn't the best time to have your holiday meal, but rather you push it up and maybe have brunch or a luncheon for your family. So there are so many things that you can do based on your intimate knowledge of your loved one to adjust the day so you can have the best possible outcome.
And what are some types of gifts that people could consider that would really be beneficial to somebody with Alzheimer's disease?
Right. So many different things. But again, let's look at this kind of in stages. And then, Greg, one of the things we haven't talked about many times before, but how about some gift ideas for caregivers or care partners, as we like to say at the Alzheimer's Association? So I think first and foremost, in the earliest stages of Alzheimer's disease, where we're just beginning to have some of these concerns, we have new memory loss. One of the things that is so helpful are identification pieces. It might be jewelry. It might be a tag, right? That we put in somebody's clothing or sew into a coat just to make sure that they're always safe. Perhaps it's some type of technology adjustments, right? A simpler television remote or a simpler telephone for people to use. There are so many great gadgets out there. The other thing that we know is that people with Alzheimer's disease in all stages really do best when they're talking about things that happened in the past, magazines perhaps that they liked in the past, or old family pictures, or ordering yearbooks or various things. That would be a source of stimulation, but not overstimulation, and would allow people to be in the moment. Sometimes changing some of the artwork in your home using peaceful pictures or drawings or motivational things can be useful and helpful. As we enter that moderate stage, again, looking at some things that we can do to help folks make life easier. So perhaps we switch out the jeans at this stage and maybe look at some sweatpants or easy to use clothing items as a gift. Falls become a concern, of course. So slip-free socks or slip-free slippers to make sure that folks are safe at home. And then there is a place called the Al's Store, where you can find cards that help people communicate, or videos from the past, other things that people can utilize, which are so useful. And then in the later stages, it's really things for comfort. So warm and comfortable pajamas, lotions, other things that will help people, body and mind, feel at peace and feel soothed. And then how about our caregivers? We really need to think about how overwhelming life can be for them. How about a gift card or a coupon for some house cleaning or a meal delivery? Imagine how nice that would be in the middle of a cold winter day for a care partner to receive a meal. And then gift cards for grocery stores or somebody to do the shopping would be such a gift for our care partners doing God's work every day.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. So that's Al's Store, ALZ Store.
Yep.
There are just a couple of things that we have piloted over the last couple of years that we can attest work that, again, caregivers may not know about. These are things called Relish. Relish are products that really soothe and calm individuals with Alzheimer's disease. We have two platforms that go right through your TV with programming not only for the caregiver to support them, but for the individual with dementia. One is called Zinnia TV. The other is Memory Lane TV. We also have Map Habit, which has been shown both with people with ADD and Alzheimer's disease to retrain the brain on how to do your activities of daily living. So there are those types of things out there as well. And I raise those because, for the public, it's hard to trust what platforms or technology is real, works, has been measured, and we've done all those. So Beth, talk a little bit about why the holiday season might be stressful for somebody with Alzheimer's and dementia, and how to mitigate that. You started to talk about that, but what's maybe the science behind it that makes this a difficult time?
Sure. So Alzheimer's disease begins by impacting a tiny area of the brain called the hippocampus. And that piece of the brain is really responsible for storing new data. And so what we know for people with this disease is they have difficulty making and storing the newest information they're receiving. And yet we know there are many other signs and symptoms too. So they can get it easily confused, even with the people they love and even in the places they love. So all of that to say that memory loss and confusion often then relates to not knowing all the people that are in your life that you certainly knew 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And so there is an expectation among the visitor that this person is going to know me. And when they don't, that can create a little bit of chaos. Again, easily mitigated by the care partner's advanced planning and perhaps telephone calls to visitors to say, you know, Aunt Barb isn't the way that you remember her from 2 years ago. When you come in, please be sure to share your name with us, and please be sure to, adjust your expectations based on this memory loss, repeating of stories, episodic confusion. And that will help your guests and your person with dementia so much, because the person with dementia then won't feel self-conscious, nor will they feel or become defensive when somebody says, "How do you not remember me?" So that's really helpful. The other thing is that because our memory and cognition is changing with this disease, and I say Alzheimer's and any of the related dementias, the other thing that happens is that overwhelming environments become too much. So too loud, too busy, too chaotic, too much in the environment is simply too much. I say to caregivers all the time, the easy phrase is too much is too much. And what do we all have at the holidays, Greg? Too much,
Too
right?
much.
Too much noise, too much food, too many decorations, too much of everything. And that really creates a lot of agitation and angst for people with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So to minimize that, and I think some amount of decorations, so important because it serves as a reminder, particularly using those favorites from over the years, favorites from the past. So soothing for people with Alzheimer's disease. But again, 10 grandchildren and 5 children and the nieces and nephews and all these people at one time with a gigantic smorgasbord of food is probably simply going to be too much for your loved one.
Yeah, so you need a pre-game plan. And I like your term, adjusting expectations, right? It's not like it's a secret in the family that somebody might have memory loss or dementia. So, your website, the Alzheimer's Association, has all of these tips and tools. You have the Alzheimer's store. So just spending a little time up front, having a game plan coming in. One of the things that we talked about a couple of years ago when we first did this was, and I think about this all the time, you can still involve somebody in the festivities and the holidays if they have dementia. I mean, the last thing you want to do is have Bob sitting in the chair and nobody interacting with them for the next 4.5 hours. So how might somebody involve their loved one in the actual festivities and not as kind of a benchmark?
Absolutely. And that's such a good point. You're absolutely right. Sometimes people, they sort of withdraw a little bit because they can't keep up with the pace of conversation. So I think ensuring that your loved one is well rested prior to the arrival of guests. And also think about how can your loved one participate. In the early stages of this disease, your loved one may be able to help with tasks like baking, making a salad, cutting vegetables, doing things. As the disease progresses, of course, those things are going to be more difficult, but perhaps they could fold napkins or set the table or somehow be engaged and be helpful. And then in terms of making sure that guests know what the limits are, think about, again, things that your loved one is successful doing. So perhaps it is, watching a music video of some music from the past, holiday music of the past, or perhaps it's looking at old yearbooks or photo albums where there are many recognizable faces, because again, for folks with Alzheimer's disease, they often remember folks from the past very, very well, while it's current events that are difficult for them. So singing old songs, always a great idea. And also reading stories. There are some stories that we've heard so many times. For many people, we've heard The Night Before Christmas so many times over the years that will begin to come back a little bit if we reread things from the past. And that helps people to feel good because they're not left out.
I think one of the other things, Beth, I didn't tell you about that we have launched. When you talk about, your past memories being much more clear than current, is a project we had with LifeBio, where this is a great time over the holidays, where you can use this technology to tell your life story and have your family around, especially the grandkids. Or oftentimes you don't know what it was like to grow up in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, and the advent of technology and some of the wars and things like that. So it's a really great point.
Yeah, can I add to that? I love that, because I remember one of the first things I did many years ago as an entry-level social worker in a nursing home. And I had a group of folks that had early Alzheimer's disease or dementia. And it was a group that I had selected because they didn't have many or any family. And I thought, oh my goodness. And so we talked about Christmases over the years. So the first session was about Christmas as a child. What was your favorite ornament, your favorite cookie? And again, I'm not asking them about today. So when I talked about when you were a little girl, what was your favorite cookie? There was no silence in that room. Everybody had an answer, even with their Alzheimer's disease or dementia, because they could very articulately talk about things that happened in the past. If I had asked the question that morning, what did you have for breakfast? The likelihood is I would have had silence in the room. So it's so important, people beaming as they thought about and talked about those happy moments and memories.
That's excellent. My favorite cookie was the little round cannonballs.
I didn't even know that one, but how about the peanut butter chocolate kiss?
Yeah, see, that's pretty popular right there.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears a little bit, because maybe, again, this time of year, families will get together that may not have be seeing each other for quite some time or over the course of a year. If somebody suspects potential memory loss, and it's not hard to see if you're paying attention, right?
Right.
What some of the warning signs are, what should somebody do if they suspect? Because I know we're going to talk about how important early identification is, but now we're shifting into that, and it's so critical now with the advancements that are made. But what are some of the things that people should be looking at, and if they see it, what should they do?
Yeah, Greg, I appreciate this question so much. Do you know that the busiest time at our helpline, our contact center, 1-800 number, comes around and right after holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas? The reason for that is what you just pointed out. There are many people that live far away. We know what that's like in today's society. And they talk to their loved ones by telephone. But by telephone, it's pretty easy to have that social conversation and not notice that some of these things are more significant than we thought. So then a visit happens, right? You spend 3 or 4 days living with someone who now is repeating themselves, and perhaps things are a little bit more unkept in the household. Perhaps you observe difficulties with language ability. Perhaps you see that there's a stack of unpaid bills or old food in the refrigerator that hasn't been disposed of. You begin to observe a lot of things. So the first thing to do, I think, is to evaluate whether or not your loved one is somebody that you can have this open conversation with. And if so, that, of course, is so important. And you mentioned something that's really critical, Greg, in that now that we have some new treatments approved for the earliest stage of Alzheimer's disease, it's great to have this conversation in the context of, I've noticed a few things changing with your memory and other skills. And I just read that there are new treatments for this. So maybe we should talk to the doctor. When you can give people that idea of hopefulness, it is such a game changer. I often say to people, nobody wants to be diagnosed with cancer. But if you have to be diagnosed with cancer, would you prefer stage 1 or stage 4? And now that same premise is one that we can absolutely tie to Alzheimer's disease and dementia. You want to be diagnosed in stage 1, that earliest stage, so that you can take advantage of some of these treatments. So having that discussion is the first step. However, there are some people for whom that discussion is too difficult. And the idea of having it is one that simply will turn family members away. And in that circumstance, I would say either call us at the Alzheimer's Association and we'll give you some tips. We actually have a program called Having Difficult Conversations, and it starts with that one. Or if you have a family doctor that's been in the picture for a long time, perhaps giving a call to the office and say, you know, I've just spent 3 days with my mom and I noticed some things, some warning signs that make me concerned. Can we schedule a memory evaluation that happens at the next doctor's visit?
So before we take a break, because what I want you to do when we get back from break is walk us through the 10 signs. And I'm sure there's more, but you got standard. And then I want to talk about some of the new medications and what they do. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, Beth, because there's things that you've told me over the years that are just locked in my brain, and that there are over 70 different conditions that can mimic memory loss and dementia. And these could be things like alcohol use, a UTI, right? Dehydration, et cetera. So talk to folks here about, those types of things, like, going to see somebody to knock these things that are not dementia off the plate, right, are really, really important, because not everything is necessarily.
That's right. So there are many things that we used to call reversible dementia. We now categorize it more in the area of delirium, and they are really treatable conditions that cause many of these same symptoms we see in Alzheimer's disease. It might be memory loss, it might be acute confusion, it might be a disc repair, difficulty with language. And you're right, Greg, some of those things include serious vitamin B12 deficiency, significant hypothyroidism, all treatable conditions. There are so many of them. So that's the first thing we always want to do, is rule out anything that can be treated. But even now, in the ones that we used to consider, oh my gosh, this is not a treatable illness, we can. So years ago, we couldn't treat MS, which creates a form of dementia. Parkinson's. If your loved one is having dementia as a result of strokes or a large stroke, what about medication to manage blood pressure, reduce the risk of further strokes, and or look at something like a Watchman device? So many treatments that benefit not only our heart, our overall body, but our brains as well.
Everybody can understand about cancer. If you're diagnosed with cancer, you're going to get it treated. You're not going to just go home and pretend it doesn't exist. And that's so true for so many diseases. You have some heart pain, you're going to get it checked out. But people are so afraid of having Alzheimer's disease because they've seen it over the course of their lifetime. And I think what we're trying to do here today is say, it may not necessarily be Alzheimer's disease and dementia. The earlier we catch it, there's things that we can do, and we're going to talk about that after the break. Yeah. So planning for the holidays is one thing, but communicating with family about their lives, their future, can be a great tradition as well. If you're getting together with a family in a nursing home or some skilled facility, or et cetera, why not talk to them about their experience? We just talked a little bit about that. So if you need help bringing a concern or attention of facility staff, the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, which is a statewide program administered by NYSOFA, is here to help. Take a look at this. All right, well, welcome back. So we're going to go through, well, not we, Beth is, the 10 warning signs, things that you might want to look for. And as she had mentioned, If the conversation is difficult or you don't know what to do, that's what the Alzheimer's Association is all about. And the recommendations also talk to a doctor if that's easier and you have that type of relationship. So we're going to cover two things. What are the 10 signs, things to look for? And then there are also 2 recently approved medications to treat symptoms associated with Alzheimer's disease that address things like insomnia and agitation. And if you could talk a little bit more about those as well, because this is, the advancements are spectacular.
Sure. Before I do that, I am going to just say how much I love that oh my goodness, I can't even get the words out. Ombudsman program, Greg. It is terrific. And I want to add one more thing about gift giving. If your loved one is in a facility, perhaps meet with somebody from the activities department or the social work department and see, is there something the facility could use that would benefit your loved one and many others as well? One of my favorite gift ideas is a bird feeder that actually plays songs or plays melodies of birds tweeting. Such a soothing thing for so many people, benefits many. It's a great gift for the facility and your loved one. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we move into this. But as you indicated, and as we've talked about a little bit, there are going to be many families visiting their loved ones, and they're going to notice little things here and there. We have a terrific document at the Alzheimer's Association called the 10 Warning Signs of Alzheimer's Disease or Dementia. And it really does walk you through all of these. I suggest to people all the time, you get this, download it, look at it, and make a note of all of the things that you're noticing. Because so often families will contact the doctor or they'll call the parent or another parent and say, I noticed that mom's memory is changing. But the doctor is quick to then often say, well, everybody's memory changes a little as we get older. And that's easy for anyone to say. And it's true. But what we're looking at in Alzheimer's disease or other dementias is different. We're looking at memory loss that disrupts daily life. So not the occasional, I walked downstairs to get a hammer and I forgot what I went down there for, and then I have to come back up and walk down again. This is the person that is forgetting significant birthdays or missing doctor's appointments, or there are unpaid bills on the counter, just several things. As a result of not remembering, they're repeating the same story. They may be getting lost, going to the places that they know very well, like the grocery store, or not even recognize things in their own home. They're having difficulty with complex tasks and tasks that have several steps to them. So many people in the early stages, they will make a sandwich for a meal, but if you ask them to put together a meal that requires the oven and a stovetop and other things, they may have difficulty because of the number of steps. Mathematical calculations often change. Sometimes you'll see changes in personality or behavior, ranging from accusing people of hiding things that perhaps you have misplaced to withdrawing from activities because you're self-conscious about your ability to participate. Communication becomes impacted, where we have difficulty finding the words that we want to say. So you might see people pointing to things more often than they did before, as opposed to utilizing words. So all of these warning signs come together to create a picture of impaired cognition. So when we talk about cognition, we're talking about skills that help us to think and function in everyday life. And we suggest to people that when you see 2 or 3 or certainly more of those warning signs, it's a critical time to talk with your loved one and or talk with their healthcare providers, and talk amongst yourselves in a family as well, because that's important too. Greg, you and I have been doing this work a long time. We know how challenging it can be for a family to be on the same page. And we also know how terrific it is when a family is on the same page. It helps everything work much more smoothly. And you have folks at the Office for Aging that can help families get the tools they need to come together. We have them at the Alzheimer's Association. The Centers for Excellence in Alzheimer's Disease Diagnosis have social workers that can help families. But getting folks on the same page and all understanding is really important as well. And then you mentioned the most important thing here, and that is that we have 2 new treatments that have been approved by the FDA for one of the co-pathologies in Alzheimer's disease. So let me explain that really quickly by saying Alzheimer's disease is caused by the overaccumulation of two proteins in the brain. One is called amyloid and the other is called tau. And when they overaccumulate in the brain, they impact the nerve cells, either the nerve cell itself or the pathway between nerve cells. And that impact creates difficulty for those nerve cells to do the work that they need to do. And so as a result, over time, those nerve cells die and people decline in the disease. And we see it. We can look at it on an MRI, see nerve cells impacted over time, volume shrinkage of the brain, and it correlates beautifully, sadly, with an individual declining in this disease. The two new treatments attack one of those pathologies in Alzheimer's disease, specifically the overburden of amyloid. And when we can attack that amyloid, it's almost like having a cholesterol busting medication. These are amyloid busting medications, and they are stopping, in many, many cases, the overaccumulation of amyloid. The thing about them are they have to be given early. If the amyloid train has left the station, as I say, it's going to be too late. And there is not going to be the approval or coverage for these medications. So it is critical that people are diagnosed early. I want to tell you really quickly a fabulous success story that I heard at our leadership summit last year. We heard from a gentleman who was a primary care provider, gerontologist specifically, who was diagnosed at 59 with Alzheimer's disease. He didn't see the symptoms in himself, but one of his colleagues sat down with him one day and said, "Bruce, I think you're on the other side of the desk today." And they chatted for a while and did some testing. And sure enough, Dr. Bruce had Alzheimer's disease. He went immediately on lecanemab, one of these amyloid busting medications I just spoke about. And this year at the conference, he shared a copy of his PET scans from last year and this year. Last year, he had an overabundance of amyloid shading in his PET scan. And this year, that amyloid was so reduced, he had what was called a normal PET.
Biggest myth out there is nothing can be done. And that story illustrates that that is not the case anymore. And putting your head in the sand and hoping it's going to go away is not the right strategy. And you know, I think about the remark you made about families and hoping families get on the same page. As I go through the holidays every year, you know, doing, you know, the work that I've done over the last 35 years and working with families, most of the families that you see on the holiday commercials are not the families that I work with, right? I wish that it was, but it's not the case. And I think why we're so passionate about doing shows like this, Beth, is it's one thing to have be educated on a certain topic, to understand the new things that are coming out, the advancements that are being made because of all this research. But the second most important thing is it has to be linked with resources. You know, what good's the information if you don't have if you don't know where to go to get it? So I know you've said this twice, but I'm going to ask you to say it a third time. Help is available 24/7. Oh, Alex just put it right up there. Yes. There it is. Yes. 24/7, the helpline is available.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say that is our 1-800 number. I appreciate you, Alex, for putting that up there. And we have Masters Prepared Dementia Specialists on the other end of that phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, Greg, when you and I are busy cooking on Christmas Day, there's going to be somebody on the other end of that telephone for families who need us. In addition to that, our website, very simple, alz.org, is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week as well. And it's interesting to me how many clicks we get on the website, and at night we get calls at the call center. For a lot of care partners, that's the time that they have a few free moments to get their information. So it is so important that we are available for people 24 hours a day.
really positive ideas for skilled residential facilities, other housing, et cetera. So I'm going to move over here. And behind me is our animatronic dog and cat, as well as there's a walker squawker. You talked about the bird. And we have these in people's homes with dementia, Alzheimer's disease, but they're also in social adult day, nursing homes, veterans hospitals, et cetera, that have the same type of results, really reducing agitation, helping people with their anxiety, very comforting and soothing. And there's been multiple studies for individuals that have Alzheimer's disease on their efficacy. So it's another great potential gift idea. Beth, before we go in, go ahead.
So when we were talking about gifts earlier and I was looking behind you and I wanted to mention that, but isn't there a way that people can get those pets through NYSOFA or their local agency, their local?
Traditionally they can, and we've already put out this year's allocation, and I'm not getting political, I'm just being honest. The tariffs have increased the price by 40%. So what I'd normally be able to provide throughout the course of the year, many of our counties still have a stock, and that is someplace you could go to see if they still have any available for somebody in the community. Absolutely.
Okay.
Beth, before we go to break, is there anything else that you wanted to underscore, you wanted me to ask, or I didn't ask and you want to talk about?
No, I just want to add one more thing. I was talking specifically about treatments for Alzheimer's disease itself, but I did want to share that within the last 5 years, there were also 2 medications approved by the FDA for symptoms that we see in many people who have these diseases. The first one is for some of the agitation and sundowning that we see in individuals with this disease. In years past, we typically would use medications, what we call off-label. So medications that we use for mental health, other conditions to treat this. But now there is a medication called Rexulti. So if you see these symptoms in your loved one, you should talk to your doctor, whether it's a primary care doctor or a neurologist about that. In addition, many people with Alzheimer's disease or dementia suffer from sleep disturbance. Very common, particularly if they're on one of the treatments for which that can be a mild side effect. So a medication was approved called Belsomra to aid in sleep. And it's one of the safest and most efficacious in this population. So again, if that's an issue, please reach out and talk to your doctor about that as well. And then that encapsulates the new treatments that have been approved by the FDA, Greg.
I'm going to ask you this, but I am, because we seem to be in a time where science is questioned. And you basically just talked about 4 FDA-approved drugs. And I know that the health department last week put out where we are as a state in vaccinations, and it's stunning. So less than half of people in nursing homes have gotten their COVID vaccination, and we're down 25% in the 65-plus population for vaccinations. Are you seeing at all, whether it be in New York or among your colleagues across the country, due to kind of an assault on science, that because there's these new drugs, people are questioning them? Or is this something that, people are so worried about, meaning I might have dementia or Alzheimer's disease, that doesn't matter? They believe the science and are taking them.
Yeah, I think that people are excited to have new treatments out there. And so they are enthusiastically moving forward. I think that because people have waited so long, they have that faith and they're willing to take the chance. But certainly we're hearing some amount of reluctance, and some amount of that is related to the side effects that come with these medications. And hey, I understand that fully. There are side effects that come with every medication. You look at the side of a Tylenol bottle, right? And there's a full list of side effects. So folks, this is not an endorsement for medication. This is really an urge to talk to your doctor, your healthcare provider, and your loved ones about whether or not you want to try these medications after you are fully informed about the risks and the benefits.
Good. That's encouraging.
I will also say, though, Greg, that between you and I, we worry a lot about the vaccine the status of vaccines across the country, because folks with Alzheimer's disease or any other chronic health condition become more susceptible to developing secondary infection. And for most people, in fact, many people with Alzheimer's disease, they pass away from a condition secondary to their Alzheimer's disease. You know that, right? So how common pneumonia, RSV, these other things that, frankly, pneumonia vaccine, right? RSV, flu shots. There's a huge uptick in flu right now in New York State. So people with Alzheimer's disease, people with cancers, people that you're going to be visiting during the holiday season are susceptible to these conditions.
Yeah, we want to make sure that they're there for these holidays, right? So before we take any audience questions, if anybody out there has questions, you put them in the chat because we're going to address those next. But in case you're wondering, I don't know how our folks do it. Live with Greg is produced by an amazing team in our at the Office for Aging's Communication Bureau. And we try to do about 3 live streams per month on a whole variety of topics. So to find out more about the show, watch this video.
Join us for Live with Greg with New York State Office for the Aging Director Greg Olson. He is a leading expert in innovations and support services in the aging field. The show presents Greg meeting with professionals and covers important topics all the way from ageism to nutrition. Live with Greg will keep you well informed about our latest resources and developments. Tune in on Facebook or YouTube for our next show. Stay updated and empowered on the world of aging.
So that's our office right there. I will tell you this. I am not a self-promoter. Those are my communications team. That's like, you have to get these messages out. I'm glad that they do, because we reach hundreds of thousands of people, and this is going to be no different. So let's take some questions from the audience. How many people have Alzheimer's in New York State?
So we know that there are about 426,000 New Yorkers with Alzheimer's disease, 7 million Americans right now, 7.2 million Americans living with Alzheimer's.
I don't know if you can tell me this, but we talked about how important prevention is earlier, and there's some pretty simple things people can do. I just saw this 20-year longitudinal study that you can reduce Alzheimer's risk just by listening to music by 40%. Having your hearing checked and hearing aids, right? Eating well, exercising. Do we have any idea if we collectively did those things, combating social isolation, staying engaged, eating well, et cetera, what the cumulative risk reduction would be?
Yeah. So Greg, I'm so glad you revisited this, because when we talk about research and we talk about the new treatments that have come out, of course, that's critically important for all of your listeners. But equally as important is what we can do on the prevention and risk reduction side, right? And so the likelihood is that we're not in a position right now to prevent all cases of Alzheimer's disease, but we sure can reduce the risk of a lot of Alzheimer's disease and dementia by many of the things that you just talked about. So I particularly am fascinated by the hearing loss, the hearing loss discussion and the new data on that. That came out of Johns Hopkins from a doctor named Frank Lin, really amazing man. And many people will say to me, why hearing loss? He argues that hearing loss is the number one most preventable thing that we can do, we can treat to reduce the risk of dementia in society. And it's not because when you don't hear things properly, you miss out on information in your world. Dr. Lin argues that when you can't hear properly, the nerve cells in your brain that we talked about earlier are taxed and have to work harder. And that hard work makes them more susceptible to the amyloid overburden and more susceptible to developing Alzheimer's disease. So how simple would it be to make sure that everybody that has hearing loss treats that hearing loss? That is such an easy way to go about this. And then in addition to that, over about the past 15 years or so, we've looked at a number of studies that look at the connection between heart health and brain health, many of the things that you just said, Greg. So we know that 25% of the blood that's pumped by the heart goes directly to the brain. Without good blood flow to the brain is not properly oxygenated and again becomes susceptible to diseases like Alzheimer's and other dementias. So what do we do in that case? Well, the Alzheimer's Association just in July shared the results of a study called the US Pointer Study. designed to create a brain health recipe. And you just gave most of the things that are in the recipe. So we want to make sure that people are following a heart healthy diet. The diet that was studied was the MIND diet, very Mediterranean based, right? And we know what that means. Lean meats and fish, good healthy oils, fresh vegetables and fruits. Maybe stay away from McDonald's, stay away from processed foods and sugars and all of that. Eat clean. It's going to help your heart. It's going to help your brain. And in addition to that, cognitive stimulation, right? The brain is an organ. We have to use it just like we want to use all of the other organs. And exercise. 5 days a week for 160 minutes of aerobic exercise and a couple of sessions of strength training every week to keep your muscles strong. So important, and can probably reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease or dementia by as much as 40%, is what the data says. 40%, even if you have genetic predisposition.
So if anybody is interested in free exercise and strength training, you can go to our website, aging.ny.gov. We have a platform called Get Set Up that is free for anybody 50 and over, that not only has these exercise and strength training, but also has caregiver support content on it. So we're constantly trying to give you some resources here at the New York State Office for Aging. But I think the purpose is really important, and it's reachable for a lot of people. My family member is showing many of the warning signs. What should we do first to address this?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit, we talked about this, to a good extent earlier. Greg just came up in discussion. But of course, if you're able to talk to your loved one, that's a great first step. Perhaps, again, talking to others in your family, getting their observations, and again, trying to get folks on the same page, talking with a primary care provider. But the addition I want to make at this time to that is that in addition to the treatments that have been approved by the FDA and all that we've learned about lifestyle and reduction, prevention, there have also been 2 blood tests approved by the FDA for the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. So for many years, we've been using sort of a complex puzzle piece approach to making a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. It's going to help us greatly and help all of the people that are listening to this today, because think about how often we use blood tests for simple diagnoses of cholesterol, diabetes, various blood cancers, other cancers, flu. We use blood tests every single day. We haven't had one for Alzheimer's disease. Now we do. And I'm sorry,
3 weeks ago, and now everybody does.
Yeah. So we can, so the question, are the blood tests covered by insurance? They're covered by Medicare and Medicaid. I hope they're also covered by most private insurers. Most private insurers take their lead from Medicare and Medicaid. So you can find that out through your insurance company. But again, these blood tests are 90% accurate. And so you can talk to your primary care doctor about getting the test. Now, we're asked all the time, Greg, by people, if my mother or father had Alzheimer's disease, can I go get a blood test to see if I'm going to get it? That's not the way this blood tests work. It tests for the ratio of amyloid to tau, and that ratio is only present if you have an overburden of those 2 things. So the only way to secure or get the blood test is if you are symptomatic.
Got it. Thanks, Beth. I want to go back to, before we wrap up, the advice that you have given people. And I'm just going to, again, and we've both worked with families before. So for the audience out there, the number one fear that older adults have as they get older, especially if they wind up with the disease, is that their family's going to force them into a nursing home. They're going to lose their independence. So the professionals at the Alzheimer's Association know this. So I would say, before you talk to your loved one or before you talk to your doctor, talk to a professional about how you approach those others and recognize that that's the biggest fear that people have. And, husbands and wives and families have this conversation all the time. Please don't put me in a nursing home. Please don't put me in a nursing home. So just be very, very sensitive to that, which is why you have experts at the Alzheimer Association that can kind of help you navigate those conversations, because they're very, very difficult conversations.
Right.
Right. Go ahead.
And I was going to say, Greg, and knowing that we live in a fairly service-rich state, so having some knowledge about what services are available in your communities, which is something that information we can provide at the association, but certainly information that your group can provide as well. And that will help you to reassure your loved one that, no, this A doesn't equal B, right? It means that we've got a chronic diagnosis that we're going to have to work together to take care of, but we may be able to do that utilizing many of the resources that are available here in New York State.
For me. So every county in New York State has a county office for aging. There's Alzheimer's at chapters. You've got the 1-800 number, and you're spot on. There's a lot of community-based services that are provided every single day that take tasks off of caregivers and can help also engage your older loved one. So that's right. There's two others that I want to mention, and I'm going to ask Alex and Darren. Darren's going to put it in the chat. Alex will put it right here, that are also free for any caregiver in the state of New York, regardless of who you're caring for. The first is our New York Caregiver Portal, powered by TruAlta. It's an evidence-based platform that, depending on who you're, provides you with manageable bite-sized resources in writing over a short podcast or videos to help you along your journey. The second is our partnership with Archangels that created the Caregiver Intensity Index. There it is right there, that for under 2 minutes, based on a series of evidence-based questions, can tell you where you are in your journey. Green, I'm doing good so far. Yellow, there's some issues. Or red, I'm in crisis. And then direct back to not only resources like the Alzheimer's Association, but also resources like ours and many, many more. Those are free to any caregiver in the state of New York, regardless of who you're caring for. So, Beth, it's always a pleasure to have you on. You're a wealth of knowledge and just an extraordinary human being. As always, I want to thank our communications team, Roger, Alex, and Darren, for making these productions somehow go off seamless. And we'll be back in 1 week with to introduce you all, if you haven't already, to a project we launched a couple of years ago. It's called Discover Live. And it's the ability once a week for 52 weeks a year to go to a professional tour to over 200 locations around the world, and how that's helping to combat social isolation and create friendships in the community. So again, thanks for joining us today. Beth, you're the best. Thanks to everybody out there. Have a safe holiday. We'll see you in a week or so.
Live with Greg is a production of the New York State Office for the Aging Communications Bureau. Please join us next time.